everybody. It's Dave here and Darren over there. We're your two old bloggers been commenting publicly on your Minnesota Vikings for 2.5 decades apiece. Yes, it's a long, long time. And, this is going to drive me crazy. I've got a window open somewhere. There we go. All right. No, that ain't the one either. Hold on. There we go. All right. I hate when that happens. I get double. I get myself twice. So, what we're here to talk about today, this Father's Day, and happy Father's Day to all you MFers out there. It is a great day. We're going to be reviewing what happened during MiniCamp this week, and it was a fun week, and it was good. And a lot of things to go down. We're going to go over this week in Vikings land, of course, and then we're going to discuss Darren's worries about the backup quarterback spot. All next on Two Old Bloggers. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. How's things in the Great White North, Darren?
Just ducky, Dave. How about you?
Hey, it's beautiful down here today, and it's a beautiful day to enjoy some golf, except for it's weather delayed on the TV, but it's even better day to talk Vikings football.
Never a bad day to do that, Dave. Except maybe after a crushing wild card loss on the road.
That could be. There are a few days when it is bad, but today isn't one of them.
No.
So, all right. We thought we'd start with talking about the MiniCamp and the MiniCamp rundown in theme 1. And here we go.
Yes, we do. Here we go. Another milestone in the Vikings offseason this week with the mandatory minicamp rolling through. And of course, with the minicamp, any of the OTAs, another opportunity for Vikings fans to get some flavor on what the team's going to look like in 2025. Now, I was not at mandatory minicamp. I'm not in Minnesota. I wouldn't have credentials even if I was. So like just everybody else here, I'm basing my thoughts on this based on the people who were there, the writers and media who cover the Vikings and do have access and covered. I think all 3 days were open to the media for some portion. So we got a few more nuggets on players and how things are looking compared to the OTAs where there was just one practice that was open to the media, that sort of thing. And of course, with the minicamp, right from now, every practice, everything that's open to the media through training camp, everything from now and even before that until game 1 on September 8th against the Bears, the scrutiny on J.J. McCarthy is going to be, that's going to be the number one topic pretty much every day, and rightfully so. So what did we learn this week significant about J.J. McCarthy? Well, some talk that he threw some interceptions in some of his work at minicamp. Day 2 was maybe not a stellar day for J.J. McCarthy. I say this is not a big deal because if you think back, Dave, on last year, just Sam Darnold coming in, an unknown guy and not an unknown guy, but a guy who was unproven as far as how good he could be. Lots of concerns about how he would work as the Vikings quarterback. And you know, if you remember, Dave, on those reports in OTAs, training camp, mini camp, the joint practices with the Browns, lots of reports of where Darnold threw interceptions. Some days he did not have as good a days as others. And in the end, he had a Pro Bowl season and was a big reason why we finished 14-3. So the fact that JJ McCarthy struggled a bit at times, I think that is good. It is good to struggle now. That is where you get the growth as a player, especially if you're a 22-year-old who has never started an NFL game, exhibition or a regular season in your life. So this is where the growth starts. And I think Kevin O'Connell probably has a big laugh when he sees the media pouring over these OTAs and minicamp and trying to like make big declarations on how a player looks and how good they're going to be, because he knows this is a process and it's a long process. But nonetheless, we're going to be focusing on it. And I think, interceptions and all, there's going to be interceptions because JJ McCarthy is maybe trying throws he wouldn't try in a game just to kind of see, what that looks like. Maybe sometimes it looks like an interception. He'll learn from that. But I think, Dave, and I think that you would probably agree, is that I feel what we did here also this week was that JJ McCarthy did lots of good things. He still looks like a quarterback who, again, knows what he's doing. He is not overwhelmed. He is not. You don't have reports where the writers are saying this guy just looks terrible. He does not look ready. That is not what we were hearing. Just exact opposite, really. And so I feel really good about where JJ McCarthy is, just like I felt really good from what I heard from the OTAs, the couple of OTAs he has had and performed in previously. Another good thing, the knee issue is not an issue. No problems with mobility. He said himself, it feels strong. It feels great. It's not limiting his movement in any way. But I just feel, again, the minicamp, there's some rocky parts. You'd expect that with any player and JJ McCarthy, but there's been lots of good things, and I'm feeling pretty good about where he's at right now. I think he is right where he needs to be at this point in the off season.
As well he should. Now, a couple of those interceptions I heard on broadcast where there was miscommunication between him and the receiver. Possibly the receiver ran the wrong route or did whatever and ended up, cutting it short when he should have gone deeper or whatever it was. And that happens. That's what this time of year is for, is to work on that sort of stuff and improve that communication and make sure everybody's on the right page. And I'm sure there was some that he, it was his fault. Well, that's fine. That's what it's for. This time to get tuned in to what you need to do for the season and to actually dial things up to make it, fine. So he's on target all the time. And we're going to find out if that's the case. I think it will be. There was the whole from this week of he's got a mediocre arm. And everybody, Matthew Collar, Judd Zolgad, Tyler, everybody's saying, no, dudes, you're way wrong. The dude's got a rocket. And even Justin Jefferson came out and said, no, he zips it. And it's such a tight spiral. It is moving. It is flying. And that's what we want, especially with throws over the middle. So I'm happy with what happened this week. It's all looking up when it comes to JJ McCarthy. And that's what we want. We want him to come in being strong, being a leader. And we didn't talk about, he's building the whole team mentorship thing besides, pairing with JJ and trying Mike and Ike's at the Wolves game. He's afterwards when he was asked about, are you going to throw with the receivers? And he says, heck yeah, I am, in the weeks off. And he goes, I'll go to them if I have to, but I'm going to gather them up here and we're going to throw. And you can't beat that. It's a good thing. It is something that I remember us talking about. Why isn't a certain quarterback out throwing with his receivers? And it is what it is. He's working well. He's getting used to Ryan Kelly. He's getting used to, I think he knows the playbook. I can't wait to see, when we get August and it gets a little bit cranked up some more, and then especially the dual practices Now, we've only got the one with the Patriots so far, but the Rams may happen from what I'm hearing, but we'll see. It's great. He's opened up. The team is built, and everybody's so high on the team and says Ryan Kelly said he's never seen so much talent top to bottom that he can lead us to a Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl window's open now. It's not open next year. It's open now. Hopefully.
As Drew Bunting was commenting, it's reps at this time of the year. That's what you need. That's what all the players need. That's what J.J. McCarthy needs. That's what he's getting. Are some of those reps going to be not the greatest throws? Absolutely. When you throw 200 passes a day or whatever it is, some of those aren't going to be dead on. But again, that's how you refine things and learn through, okay, that certain situation, my feet weren't where they needed to be, or my eyes weren't where they needed to be. And then he talks to Josh McCown and Kevin O'Connell about those things, or they talk to him. They get that sorted out and get the muscle memory going. So in a game, that isn't even a thought to JJ McCarthy. He just does it like a robot during the game, regardless of what's coming at him or who's coming at him. And so, yeah. And the arm thing, I don't understand that, because I did not watch J.J. McCarthy a whole ton as a college quarterback, except in the playoffs in the 2 years where Michigan went deep in that. But I never, even then, I felt like, why are people worried about this guy's arm? Looks plenty fine to me. And yeah, I never thought that I was concerned. It wasn't like you weren't looking like it was Chad Pennington out there when he's throwing the ball. He had plenty of zip from what I saw at Michigan. And he's been refining his mechanics and getting a little bit stronger in the year and over a year that he's been a Viking and been an NFL player.
Mm-hmm. And as Sean has mentioned, last year he basically had one speed. This year we're starting to see him develop, as he calls it, different pitches, where he's starting to lay stuff in when it's called for or zip it when it's called for. He's learning how to do that, and that is absolutely fantastic, because it's going to reap benefits when the games start counting. I think the OTAs for him have been wonderful.
Well, yeah, you'd be worried if you were getting reports all the time that he's been an absolute train wreck. Not even close to that. Most of the time it's been command of the offense, looks confident, showing the leadership abilities. Yeah, are some throws not where they need to be? Absolutely. But again, when you throw that many passes in a practice, that is going to happen from time to time.
Even with the best quarterbacks.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, that brings us to the next little bit of that you wanted to cover on OTAs.
Yeah, there are a few things that I thought was important based on what I read, and the McCarthy thing is the big one. Now, the second thing is this time of year, Dave, we see it every year. He's in the greatest shape of his life. Blah, 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 blah. You're getting to this point where there's certain players that the media and fans are looking on to make the leap, as I call it, and be a better player in this year than they were last year. Dallas Turner is one of those guys. I talked about him a few weeks ago, that he's one of the guys that I'm like looking at as getting scrutiny from me, because last year he did not have the rookie season that I think we expected. But I think most people have seen the videos or the photos of Turner. He looks noticeably bigger, particularly on the lower half this year. And I think one of the things that he needed to do when he came from Alabama, and he was only 21 years old last year, Dave, as a rookie, really young these days for a rookie, was that he needed to add probably 10 pounds of good, 10 to 15 pounds of good weight. It looks like he has done that because you got to be able to hold the edge at the NFL level and have some power. It looks like he's done that. And listening to Brian Flores talk about Dallas Turner in his press conference this week at OTAs, he raved about Turner, about his work ethic, about his football smarts, that he's learned a lot of the defense. He also explained why last year's season for Dallas Turner, it was why it was a muted rookie season and why that wasn't such a bad thing. And I think everybody also, most of us, I think, have heard or read that little, the thing that caught media attention's eye was Dallas Turner. One particular play, I think it was on day one of minicamp, where he was in coverage. He covered, it was a wide receiver, tight end down the seam, made a nice pass breakup in coverage. Now, Dallas Turner is an edge rusher. He's supposed to make his money as a pass rusher. But I think Brian Flores has shown, and we saw it at times last year in Turner's rookie year, he dropped into coverage a fair bit. Turner might not be exclusively a guy who just gets after the quarterback at the NFL level with the Vikings. He might be dropping into coverage and doing other things that Flores asks him to, a bit similar to maybe what Anthony Barr did when he was with the Vikings under Mike Zimmer. Barr didn't rush the quarterback as much as we expected. I don't think it's going to be that level. Like, Turner's not going to be an off-the-ball guy like Barr is, but he might be dropping into coverage more than we expect because he's got the athleticism and he's shown an ability to do it. Like when he did the undercut of Geno Smith's pass and got the interception last year in Seattle. Those are the kind of things Dallas Turner can do. He's clearly going to have the opportunity this year, Dave. No Patrick Jones the third anymore. And Forrest talked about how he feels we've got 3 starting edge rushers right now: Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Dallas Turner. So the opportunities are going to be there for Turner. What he does with them, we'll have to wait and see. But even though I've got concerns because I like my rookies to make an impact in the rookie year, it always gives me a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling heading into year 2 that they're going to be as good as advertised. But I don't feel discouraged by the year he had last year. I think that Turner, you're going to see a way big uptick in production from him and impact. And this weekend's minicamp, the focus is clearly on him on the defense, I think, as to what he's going to do this year in year 2.
Hey, I concur. I think we're going to see much, much more of him. It's as into possibly 500 to 600 snaps. I could see all 3.
Right?
I could see all 3 edge rushers, Grenard and Van Ginkel, on there. Now he's basically being brought up in the Van Ginkel role with the more pass coverage versus Grenard. But I could see him rotating in for both of them if, one of them needs a breather, or all 3 of them being on the field at the same time, because that's what B-Flow wants to absolutely mesmerize quarterbacks with. I think it's going to be a big night and day difference over what we saw last year to what we see this year, and it will be hugely impactful.
Yes. Last year, Jihad Ward was kind of the third edge rusher that went in their NASCAR packages along with Grenard, Van Ginkel, and sometimes Turner, but sometimes somebody else. And but this year, Turner is going to get, you said 500, 600 defensive snaps, definitely. And I think that that's going to help Grenard and Van Ginkel too, because they had a lot of mileage last year, over 900 defensive snaps. Their career highs for both. They could use a little bit of a break from time to time, but when you're playing as well as they were, it was hard to give them a break. And but if Turner can get to that level that they are, then you feel pretty good about mixing and matching them and rotating them.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I can't wait to watch him when pads come on and we can start hitting.
Yes. Going to switch to the offense now a little bit, Dave, on the minicamp. I think very significant thing was, you probably all saw the videos too, Christian Darrisaw on the field and looking like he was moving pretty well, Dave. And I'm not an expert on this, but he looked sharp in the videos. Lots of explosion and moving well, very smoothly, very fluidly. Didn't look limited at all. Does that mean, though, that he's going to be ready to start at left tackle on September the 8th when we play the Chicago Bears? I'm not sure about that yet. If we remember last year when TJ Hawkinson, who had the same injury, ACL and MCL tear, we got reports that he was looking very fluid and well when he was working off to the side at OTAs and mandatory minicamp and training camp last year. But then he didn't play his first game until November the 4th against the Colts. Now, a little bit different, though, Dave, because Hawkinson had his surgery, I think, January 24th. Darasaw had his surgery and his injury was much earlier. Darasaw's surgery was November the 4th. So about 3 months and more difference there. And Hawkinson got back on the field about basically 10 months after his surgery. Well, if you do the math, you can see that Darasaw 10 months from the November 4th would be roughly, he should be in line to, you'd think, be ready to start on September the 8th. But one thing we know about the Vikings player health and training staff is that they don't rush guys to the field, rush them onto the field. They've got a timeline set for when they're ready to go, and they won't put them in an NFL game a week earlier, a day earlier before that. We don't know what Terrell Williams, who's the head of the player performance and health crew at the Vikings, we don't know what his internal timetable is for Christian Darrisaw to be starting in an NFL game. Maybe it's September the 8th. Maybe it's a week or two later. We don't know that, but I think this is something to watch for, particularly in training camp. And do they put Christian Darrisaw on the physically unable to perform list, or how that's all going to work? But I don't think it's a guarantee that he is as good as he looked in those videos. I don't think it's a guarantee that he is ready to go September 8th. Because again, the Vikings, they've got a rehab plan for him. And I'm sure it's very set on X date. If he passes these benchmarks, he can do this. And when that date is that he can start in an NFL game and play, we do not know. Maybe it's September the 8th. Again, maybe it's a week or two later, but it will be in September, I believe. We just don't know if he's going to be ready to go on September the 8th when they play the Bears, even though Kevin McConnell said he's been knocking his rehab out of the park. He looks great. Remains to be seen, but still great news that Christian Darrisaw looks as good as he did in those videos, because he's an important piece to this offense, Dave, as you would talk about, just when you consider how the Vikings offense performed after he was gone, and they had Cam Robinson in there, which worked for a while, but then later in the year didn't work so well.
Yep, and he is generally considered one of the best left tackles in the league, generally in the top 3. And 3 isn't the number. He's good. And I saw he was squatting down, and that puts the most stress on the knee. Now, whether on the particular ACL and MCL, don't know, but it's a good sign to see. He was sort of like duck walking, and that is rough on the knees, and he did that fine. He was out there day 1 of the mini camp. Tuesday he was not out there, or Wednesday he was not out there, day 2, but that was planned.
Yes.
They wanted to see how he reacted to that sort of workload, and then he was back out there on day 3 on Thursday, which was good to see. So, and we did bring in Justin SKOL to back him up if necessary.
Yes.
I think he's going to be ready for week 1, but like you said, it may be a couple weeks after that, because he's got to get fully cleared, and then he's got to get into, not game shape, but he's got to take that few weeks to get into the rhythm of practice and hitting and doing all that stuff, and stop abusing the training staff. And I think that's part of the reason they let him out. I said, okay, you go out and abuse other offensive linemen and defensive guys for now. But I think Kevin O'Connell thought the dude has put on some more muscle. He looks stronger, which is all part of that training staff and that routine. And there may be a benefit out of this, that he comes back even more of a beast. And that would be just absolutely wonderful. I'd sit there and, yes, let's hope.
Davey likey the pancakes that Darasaw delivers on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
But I think the big thing that Darasaw has to pass is, I think, the durability issue, because he has never played a full NFL season in his 4 years in the NFL. There's always been a few, nothing like last year, but he's always missed a game or 2 or 3 here and there through concussions or ankle or various injuries. And at some point you hope that he gets that year where he plays all 17, because the Vikings need him out there badly.
17. Let's talk 21.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
20 or 21. Yes.
20 or 21. Yeah. That's what we're looking for. Yeah.
So
good news.
It's good news. It was great news to see him out there. Absolutely fantastic. Warmed everybody's heart.
Indeed. like from offense to defense here again. And I think if this week at the minicamp, Dave, if there was an award for obscure Vikings player who caught the media's attention and was mentioned, I think that Jay Ward, this third-year safety, would be my vote for that guy. And, Ward he's going into his third year. He has played virtually few, if any, defensive snaps in the first 2 years, mostly played on special teams. But this week, he ran a bit with the ones. Flores was lining him up in various spots like he would do with Josh Matelis. And so, the vibe is that Ward in his third year is set to maybe, get a greater role with the Vikings defense than he's had the previous 2 years. And we know the Vikings defense have been pretty good at being patient and drafting and developing safeties. They did it with, Josh Matelis, who barely played his first 2 years and then moved on and got a larger role as time went on. They did it with Cam Bynum. Didn't really play as much as rookie year, but then became a starter after that. And they did it with Theo Jackson, who we didn't draft, but plucked off the Tennessee Titans practice squad, and he's been with us ever since. I think Jay Ward is the next safety to do that, get the draft and develop and gradually get a greater role. And if you look at the Vikings safety room, and they released Bolden this week as well, who was part of the safety depth chart. So, I think Ward, he's got that versatility that Brian Flores likes to see with his safeties. He was a former corner early in his career at LSU, and they got switched to safety. So he's got, I think better coverage abilities than a guy who's just played safety all his life has. And I think that Jay Ward's time is coming. I don't know how many defensive snaps he's going to get this year when you got Theo Jackson, Harrison Smith, and Josh Matelis likely playing the bulk of time at safety. But like Theo Jackson did the previous 2 years, I think if they need a safety to come in, if somebody gets nicked up or whatever, it's going to be Jay Ward that does that. I think he's going to gradually get more defensive snaps this year. And I think 2026, when the Vikings might have some, Harrison Smith might not be a Viking anymore. He might be retired. I think Jay Ward is the guy who could ascend and in his fourth year become a bigger part of this defense than he has been in the previously, because mostly he's been noticed by Vikings fans for pissing them off for getting ill-timed offside penalties on like a field goal and that sort of thing. But Jay Ward, I think his time is coming, and we're going to be pleasantly surprised by what he does with that time.
Well, and he's going to be a major component of the special teams as well. So he has to, as Drew says, keep his head in the game and make sure he's showing out, because the more he shows out, the quicker he goes to, hey, now you're in a rotation at safety. And we'll see. I hope it's good. Now, another player that I've seen talked a lot about, John put a comment, is Vaughn, the cornerback that's a UDFA. He's turned some heads. Now, whether he'll make the squad, we don't know. But he is definitely impressing some people, and that's a great way to start. And you got to get
it. And I think they had Vaughn in for a top 30 visit, if I believe. So he was on their radar. But I like his size. He's 6'3", listed as 6'3". So he's got that length and ranginess that you like in a corner. Played at Utah, like a legit Division I, playing top competition all the time. So yeah, Vaughn's a guy to watch out for. I think him and McLaughlin might be battling for a roster spot, depending on how Vaughn does, going forward, especially in training camp and joint practices where things get a bit more real, and you're going to, learn more about what players can do what and handle going up against the big boys, whoever that might be.
Now, I heard Nudi's name mentioned quite a bit by the coaches this week as well. So there's some competition in that room, and that is fantastic. I'm glad there is.
We're going to be talking about that room a little bit later too, in theme 2 as well. But yeah, final thing about minicamp is I think is that if you were waiting to kind of hear about what are the fruits of the Vikings free agent and draft focus on the interior offensive line and the interior defensive line, you were disappointed because Kevin O'Connell admitted this was a passing camp. So if you were looking at, what's Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen's impact going to be on the defensive line, particularly the interior pass rush? What is Ryan Kelly? How are Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, and Donovan Jackson? How are they going to improve the pass protection on the interior and improve our running game? You're not going to find these things out because there just wasn't any contact with the offensive defensive lines to parse that out.
It's against the players' agreement.
That is we're only going to learn that a bit more probably in preseason, and maybe not even that much because those guys won't be on the field very much, I think, in preseason at all. If previous Kevin O'Connell preseasons are any way to judge it, and I think they are. So, sorry guys, you're going to have to wait, I think, until September 8th against the Bears to see what those guys do to the offensive line and the defensive line of the Vikings.
Yeah, we'll get some out of training camp. But even during training camp in August, into July and August, there's ramp-up periods before they go full pads and full, hitting. And it's still not versus an opponent.
Yes.
And so there is differences.
And Drew is asking how we feel about the corner group overall. I talked about this last week. I'm not super feeling secure about it right now and we'll talk about this when we get to Jair Alexander speculation in theme 2, but last week I said Byron Murphy Jr. is the only guy on the cornerback room right now of the Vikings who is an established starter who's played full starting snaps for a number of years at the NFL level. Other than that, we don't have anybody that I trust. So that is my concern. Brian Flores seems quite happy with what we have right now, based on what he was talking about in the presser, and I'd expect him to say that about the guys that he's got. But we will learn over the next couple of months if their comments are actual reality.
But I think Brian Flores is pretty straight up when he talks to us.
True. You're probably right. I think that,
especially compared to what he would say in Miami. I think he's pretty straight up that when he's liking somebody, there's a reason for it. And so,
I think it just with the guys that they have, whether it's Mekhi Blackman, whether it's Isaiah Rodgers, whether it's Jeff Okudah, whether it's Dwight McGlothern, and on you can go. You just don't have anybody other than Byron Murphy Jr. who has played consistently 800, 900 defensive snaps in the NFL and has done this and has done it at a competent or high level. Isaiah Rodgers' grades, PFF grades, have been pretty good, but that's been based on 300, 400 defensive snaps over the year and not being a full-time player. Looks like he's going to be a full-time player with the Vikings this year based on what Flores has said and how he was used at mandatory minicamp this week. But again, the proof is in the pudding, and the proof starts September 8th against the Chicago Bears.
Yes, it does. Now, that brings us to theme 2. This week in Vikings land.
This week in Vikings land, yes. First topic is going to be probably not surprising by anybody, but the first bit of news was Josh Oliver getting an extension. We think a very generous extension, maybe some felt. 3 years, $23.25 million, $19.9 million guaranteed for Josh Oliver. For some people, that might seem like a lot of coin for your second blocking tight end who has never played in 2 seasons with the Vikings, even 50% of the offensive snaps. Now, on the flip side of that, Dave, is that there aren't many tight ends that NFL teams feel comfortable having blocking edge rushers and defensive ends one-on-one, which the Vikings do regularly with Josh Oliver, and he does a bang-up job at it. And they also feel run blocking, he's He has no peer in the NFL as far as that goes. So when you start thinking about 3 years, $23.25 million, Dave, it's not that expensive for a tight end and who plays, even if they don't play 50% of the defensive snaps. And Josh Oliver's kind of been on the just under that in his 2 years with the Vikings. Also, we've seen, especially last year when TJ Hawkinson was out, he can catch the ball if you're throwing the ball. That's not an issue. But so I think that this signing, it's fine with me. I think it also right now you've got with him and the TJ Hawkinson extension that was done last year, wherever, both the Vikings number 1 and number 2 tight ends, they are locked into the Vikings until 2028. And with the Vikings drafting Gavin Bartholomew this year late, plus the free undrafted free agents, Urasek, Nesbitt, whatever, and you keep on doing that. I think you can cross off tight end as a position where the Vikings are going to either look to add a free agent in the next couple of years or draft a player for tight end in the next couple of years, because their 2 top starters, as long as they stay healthy, are under contract up until 2028. And the third tight end is a guy that's usually a developmental prospect anyway, that Ben Urasek might be, or Gavin Bartholomew might be, or somebody next year that they pluck, they sign as an undrafted rookie free agent. This extension allows the Vikings to concentrate on other positions in 2026 and beyond in free agency and draft. And I think that's a good thing when you can knock positions off your list and say, yeah, we're covered here. We're okay here. Because cornerback and something like that could be a different animal in a year or two.
Absolutely. And Drew calls him the best blocking tight end in the NFL right now. He's the modern incarnation of Jimmy Kleinshauser. Is what he is. And with Kevin O'Connell, Wes Phillips, and the whole crew wanting to be able to run the ball more and emphasizing running the ball, we're going to be more 12-man formations, and he will be a part of that. And I can't wait to see it go. It's going to be fun to watch. And I think, we looked at the contract. It was the 23 point something. It can go up to 27.5 if he meets all his incentives. And hopefully he does. That means he'll be playing great, and so will the Vikings.
Yes.
So it's and generally that means guys are running behind him, and he's also catching footballs and touchdowns. And hey, I can't wait. He's one of the better tight ends, even as a tight end 2 in the league. So I thought it was well worth it. And the fact that you mentioned, Darren, they're locked up, he and Hawkinson for the next 3 years, that whole Super Bowl window thing in the next 3 years, I think it's wonderful. Lots of wonderful today.
Yes. As sticking with contract extensions, though, Oliver got his this week, and now the question is, will Josh Matelis, the Vikings safety, linebacker, nickel back, whatever, edge rusher, all those things that he plays, the question is, when will he get his extension? Because he's in the last year of a 2-year, $8 million extension he signed previously, and that extension is like one of the biggest bargains in the NFL as far as based on what Matelis has done since he signed that extension. He's in the last 2 years, he's never played less than 87% of the defensive snaps for the Vikings, and last year I think it was actually previous year, it was well over 90%. And he's a core special teamer as well. So when his defensive stuff is done, he's on punt coverage and kickoff coverage and all those sorts of things. So Josh Matelis does a lot of stuff for the Vikings, and he wants to get paid for that. Now, he, quote unquote, held in at MiniCamp, but he was still there. He wants to be a Viking. The Vikings want him to be a Viking. The question right now, of course, is price point for Josh Matelis, because with all the extensions and free agent signings that the Vikings have done, last week we went over that they've got they're set in 2026 to have the second worst salary cap situation in the NFL because of all this money that they've spent out. Salary cap is not a myth, but there's ways to get around stuff too. But the Vikings probably are at a position where if they sign Matelis for an extension, whatever it might be, there's probably some hard decisions they're going to have to make in 2026 for certain players to get cap compliant. So, like, what is the price point for Josh Matelis? Just as an example, Javon Holland, former Miami Dolphins safety, he signed with the Giants this year a 3-year, $45.3 million free agent contract. $30.3 million of that is guaranteed. And you can make a strong argument that Holland was not as good a player as Matelis was the last 2 years. So I think if you're Josh Matelis, Holland's kind of does similar things as Matelis, or he's a pass rusher. He can be a nickelback. He can be, deep safety. Matelis probably could look at that as a comp, or he might want that kind of contract, or he might want better. I think we're pretty sure, despite that price, Dave, I think if you look at the Vikings safety situation, Cam Bynum is a Colt now. Lewis Seen washed out and was released last year. Harrison Smith, he's back this year. Is he back next year? Possibly this could be his last year. You could, looking at the Vikings safety units, not as deep as it once was. And you sort of almost have to have Matelis back there right now, I think. But again, the question is price point. But it's definitely going to be much more pricier to re-sign Matelis to an extension now than it was a couple of years ago when you got that basement bargain deal for two years for $8 million. But we'll see how this goes. I mean, I think Matelis is definitely going to be a Viking in 2025 and beyond, but it'll be pricey.
Mm-hmm. Now, Andrew states he's probably the third or fourth most important person on the defense right now. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the problem that comes into the computing how much he's going to make. Yeah. And I sat there and I thought about it, and where would I slot him in? And I said he's probably worth about 10 to 14 million a year is what I came up with. And then I asked Grok what he thought, and or it thought, and it spewed out a whole bunch. I equated it to more like Taysom Hill, a multi-positional important player for the team, right? Taysom Hill on the Saints played quarterback, played wide receiver, played fullback, whatever it was, all the different varieties, and he was super duper important to the Saints. But what would he be to another team?
Yeah.
What would Matelis be to another team? Would he just be a safety? Or would do they have the capacity to use him like Brian Flores does, where he's not only at safety, he's at corner, he's at linebacker a lot. Heck, he lines up on the defensive line. He's got snaps there. We've all talked about his numbers from PFF, the different positions he lines up at, and it's absolutely crazy. He played 94.2% of defensive snaps last year. You aware of that? According to PFF. Mm-hmm. And that is huge. But was it all at safety? No. It was split up. And now, it's interesting to see how they go about this. There's been some estimates, and different people have looked at this and come up with different comparisons. Kyle Duggar from the Pats is getting $14.5 million per year and is a versatile safety similar to Matelis. And that's probably the closest comp at 14.5. Jeremy Chin of the Panthers, he plays both linebacker and safety, also a multi-position guy. He's making little over $8 million a year. You have Jabril Peppers from the Pats is also making $8.3 a year on the lower end, and Mike Hilton is making $9.2 million adjusted for 2025 as a slot guy. And you got to remember, he plays a lot of time in the slot as well. So where would you put him? Now, do I put him at the top of each of those positions? And I looked at the pay at the top of each of those positions, and I can't justify that. But you bring it down to, all right, where is he in those positions? What does that person make? And then divide it up by percentage, if you want to get real technical, of how many snaps he plays in that. And then you go, all right, he's going to make more just because it's a new contract than that. And then you add the value to the Vikings because he's got a higher value to the Vikings than most other teams, and it would come up even further. My guess, like I said, was 10 to 14 million per year. We'll see. He could make 15 or 16. But we'll have to find out and see what happens here in the near future, because I bet it happens prior to training camp in August. I'll bet, or at the first part of it, we'll hear it if it doesn't happen like next week.
Mm-hmm. And, I agree with Drew. There isn't nobody more versatile on the Vikings roster than Josh Matelis. Just nobody plays the amount of positions he does.
They throw in the special teams on top of that.
Yeah. So he deserves to get paid. He will get paid. The Vikings will pay him, but we don't know. And like I said last week, Rob Brzezinski, the cap guru, he'll figure a way to get this all sorted so that it doesn't hamstring the Vikings in the future too severely. But and this is a good thing. Like it's great if you draft a player and he becomes a really good player, and you have to consider, you're quite happy to re-sign him. You just got to figure out what's the right price for it. It's way better than, I think, way overpaying for free agents all the time, who you don't have any history with. You don't know what kind of locker room people they are, what kind of character they have. The Vikings know what they have with Josh Matelis, and it's pretty damn good. And that's why they're going to extend him. It's just, when are they going to do it, and how much is it going to be? But he's earned the money that's going to be coming to him.
Mm-hmm. Daily Norseman figures 10 to 15. They're right around with where I am at. We're going to find out.
Now, Anthony was talking, Daniel was talking a little bit earlier about it. Flores is fashioning some different, some other Swiss Army knives on that team. And I think Jay Ward is one of those guys that he's, apprenticing for that kind of role, and just in case the thing doesn't turn out like we think it will.
And I'm trying to remember how old Josh Matelis is. He's been in the league, 5 years now?
27?
So if you give him like a 3-year contract, same with Josh Oliver and the line at 3-year window, I think it would be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? But speaking of corners, and the one that shook the NFC North, the news that the Packers released Jaire Alexander.
They did, and of course, immediately when you look at the Vikings cornerback room, there was speculation that Jaire Alexander would be a good fit for that room. And last week we talked about Jalen Ramsey, or I did anyway, and that speculation about him going to the Vikings and would he fit, and is it worth trading for him? I was in favor of that. This one I'm a little less jazzed about, and I know Tyler, earlier in the week you guys dealt with this, and I think that he was totally on board with signing Jaire Alexander in it, and I'm not jazzed about it. The reason I'm not jazzed about it is not because of Alexander's talent. Pretty clear that he's a very good corner, one of the best in the NFL when he's on the field. My problem is that if you look at NFL players' best ability is availability, Jaire Alexander has not been available to the Packers very much the past 3 seasons. He only played 4 games total in 2021. He played a full 16 in 2022, but then the past 2 years, he only played 7 games each. So That is a lot of injury issues. Alexander has not been on the field very much for the Packers, hasn't been able to help them as a result. And the Vikings just made a bunch of gambles on players who had some injury issues this offseason. Ryan Kelly, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen. But I think Kelly's a little bit different, but Allen and Hargrave, their injuries were just this last year. They haven't consistently shown that they've been hurt and not been able to get on the field. But Alexander's a different one. And I just feel that, talent aside, it just seems like he's a guy that's just, even though he's 2 years younger than Jalen Ramsey, and I'm in favor of the Vikings kicking the tires and seeing if they can bring in Ramsey. If you can't get on the field, you can't help the Vikings at all, Dave. And so that's why I am not in favor of this. I think that Alexander's got a track record of not being on the field when you need him to be. I'm getting Marcus Davenport vibes on him. And so I believe that the Vikings should stay away from Jair Alexander, even though, again, very good player when he's on the field, but that has not been often enough the past 4 seasons to my liking.
Well, Tyler said he'll be signed by the end of the week. Obviously, Tyler's wrong on that prediction, unless something pops up today, which I severely doubt.
Now, hey, if Alexander is available, last year the Vikings made a late signing with Stephon Gilmore, but they had a need there, right? Like Kyrie Jackson had died in a car crash. And so that things could change. Flores could look at the cornerback room as they're performing during training camp and joint practices and just say, we need a veteran. And if Alexander is there, and then maybe then you make that decision. But I feel like Alexander is going to be with another team before we get to that point. And if the Vikings feel they do need to, improve the cornerback room with a veteran, why not bring back Shaq Griffin again? He worked just fine last year, and I think he's still available. So if he doesn't sign for a team, he knows the system. Flores knows what he's going to get from him. He's a year older, potentially a year slower, but Shaq Griffin's strengths were not speed anyway, I think. So, hey, but I don't think Alexander coming to the Vikings. Hey, if it happened, the Vikings would, they would meet their quota for signing an ex-Packer every offseason, right? Because so far they haven't signed a Packer who was an ex-Packer who was a Packer in 2024 this offseason. Alexander would allow them to fulfill that quota, Dave. Well,
I've got 2 problems with it. There's, first off, if they wanted to bring him in, do you think Brian Flores would be gushing about the DBs the way he has?
No.
And secondly, the whole reason why did he get cut in the first place? Is it just because he's injured? No. It's because he's becoming a cancer up in Green Bay. And Green Bay is generally a pretty good team with decent front office and coaches, and the whole works and is put together well. It's young. And yet he's disgruntled. And he's causing problems. And that's why they let him go. Our team, from everything we hear, is very, very tight-knit, close. We talked about building relationships with J.J. McCarthy and Justin Jefferson and all that. Would bringing in somebody like Alexander sort of bust up or fracture the vibe in the locker room? That isn't going to help you get to the Super Bowl. If there's some sort of contentious bitterness going on wherever. No, you want the team thinking, one team, one fight, to salute the Army on their 250th birthday yesterday. It is, to me, it's a big fat no. But we'll see. And he hasn't been signed anywhere else yet either.
No, he is not.
And he's a flat out free agent.
Yeah, no, I think that says something about Alexander for sure. But we also know teams will, when they have a need, they'll overlook a lot of stuff and they'll bring somebody in, especially if they have a track record when he plays of being pretty good. So Alexander won't be, I think, without a job come September, but I don't think that job is going to be in Minnesota. Nor am I advocating for it. But if it did happen, so what? Yeah, it happens. He's a very talented player. We'd see where it would go. But I agree with you, Dave. The off the field stuff, which I did not mention, is an important thing because the Vikings have shown that team culture is important. They want team first players, smart guys who are willing to make sacrifices for the betterment of the collective, not just themselves. And I don't know if Jair Alexander is that guy. Certainly Drew feels he is definitely not that guy because he just called him a diva, and I think that's fair.
And he always got Justin Jeffersonitis anytime we played him. So he'd have a hard time practicing to avoiding Justin Jefferson. I think it's a bad combination. I don't think it's going to happen, but it is news this week, and we had to bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on to theme 3. This is where you start worrying again.
Can I first say that picture of Ryan Kelly impresses the hell out of me? Like, Ryan Kelly looks like a big, mean fucker.
Yes, he does.
And I am very happy to have a big, mean fucker playing center for the Minnesota Vikings. Anyway, that isn't what this segment is about.
He looks like a player Bud Grant would have loved to have back in the day.
But this segment isn't about Ryan Kelly. It's about the Vikings backup quarterback situation, which is an issue because J.J. McCarthy is not a proven commodity, even though you and I, Dave, we love J.J. McCarthy. We think he's going to be the guy and all that stuff. But it still has to happen on the field. And so I think one of the things that I think the backup quarterback issue is something that is a concern to some Vikings fans, including myself, because you look at what they have. They've got right now Sam Howell, who they traded for, basically traded almost nothing with the Seattle Seahawks to bring Sam Howell into the Vikings. They've got Brett Rippon, who was on the roster last year, was the number 3 QB the whole time. And you've got Max Brosner, an undrafted rookie free agent, played with the Golden Gophers last year, who they brought in as well. With the Vikings being like the way they built the roster this year, it looking so strong, you wonder about the Vikings' choices for backup quarterback, because if something were to happen to J.J. McCarthy, do the backups that we have right now, can they go in there and still keep the Vikings afloat and in a playoff position? I think it's questionable. And one of the things I didn't talk about it last week when we were getting into the whole Kirky speculation to the Vikings and that sort of stuff, but I think that there has been a big, for people who don't follow the Vikings on a regular basis, I think there's like the Colin Cowards and all of those people from the national media. I think there's they really feel that the Vikings need a veteran insurance policy for J.J. McCarthy at backup quarterback, because McCarthy is a bit of an unknown. And the Vikings, I don't think, have that veteran insurance policy there. They don't have a guy who's been in the league multiple years and maybe been a starter and had some success in other places as their backup quarterback right now. But let's look at those options. I mean, Sam Howell, I think this week at MiniCamp, what we heard was that this guy, he's only, I think, 5-13 as a starter in the NFL, but he's young, so he hasn't had a lot of success, but he's with the Commies, who were not the strongest.
Who were terrible at the time, yes.
At the time, but very, very strong arm. Like we've heard that. And he's young, can get into the coaching with Kevin O'Connell. And there's a belief that he can really, elevate his play compared to what it's been in the past. Brett Rippon has been kind of a journeyman dude, not thought of very highly, but Kevin O'Connell always brings him up as a guy who's very important to their quarterback room, and he likes how he's played. I think there's some question right now, though. Myself, Dave, I assume that Howell, when the Vikings traded for him, even though they really just moved draft positions in the 6th round with the Seahawks to get him, I thought that it was pretty much guaranteed that he was going to be the backup. Some people who follow the Vikings, like Darren Doogie Wolfson, think that it's a legit competition between Rippon and Sam Howell right now as far as the backup quarterback situation. I think Howell's more talented. He's got a better arm. He had better, I think, a better career at North Carolina compared to Rippon at Boise State, where Howell was facing much stiffer competition with North Carolina than Rippon did at Boise State. But nonetheless, it's something to think about. But I think that what Howell showed this week at minicamp, from what we heard, was strong arm. Showed that he's still got to learn the offense, but he made some good decisions. And that is the thing with him, because he's thrown a lot of interceptions in the time that he's played in the NFL. And so you kind of feel like, is this Nick Mullins 2.0? That's the thing that he's going to answer. I think it's a long shot to feel that Rippon will beat Howell out as the backup quarterback. And if he does, that's a failed trade by Kwesi Adofo-Mensah in doing so. But I think Howell is going to be your backup, but there is questions about that and concerns about whether Howell, if he has to play a game or two or more, because McCarthy can't, can he play at a level that can keep the Vikings, get them wins? And that's important. I don't know, but that's what you have. Behind those two guys, Max Brosmer has been getting the undrafted rookie free agent, brought in the former Golden Gopher. A few beat writers, Matthew Collar, a couple others, have said that they like what they've seen from him. He's getting the ball out quick. He's being accurate. He's shown a pretty good knowledge of the offense so far. I don't think that he's a guy that's going to be your backup this year, because rarely does undrafted rookie free agents do any of that. But I think down the road, 2026, maybe 2027, if he can stay with the Vikings, he's a guy that could progress to that level, I think. And really what's going to happen here, Dave, is that the Vikings are going to roll with the quarterback room that they have, even though, I might have some concerns, national media might have concerns, but they're going to roll with them. They're going to see what they can do in training camp, in the joint practices, and then the preseason games. These guys are going to get a lot of playing time. And if the Kevin O'Connell and Wes Phillips do not like what they're seeing, like what happened in 2022 when they're like, Sean Mannion, Kellen Mond, there's no way we can have them as the backup quarterbacks this year. They ended up trading for Nick Mullins. If the Vikings don't think Howell can do it, they don't like Brett Rippon as their backup, and they know that Brosmer isn't quite ready to be the backup, they're going to make a trade and trade a 7th rounder or a 6th rounder in 2027 to get a Mike White or a Kenny Pickett, that sort of thing, to come in, who might be a bit more established as your backup Viking, backup to JJ McCarthy. That's what they're going to do. But I think that Sam Howell is going to be just fine as your backup. And hopefully he doesn't get to take any snaps other than victory formation in 2025.
I think you're right. And from what I'm hearing from minicamp, he's rounding in and getting more comfortable with the scheme and throwing better. From some of the talkers, whether it be Collar or Judd or whomever, they're starting to see him get better. And he's getting the majority of the backup snaps, followed by a little bit by Rippon and a little bit by Brosmer. But yes, I agree. They're liking what they're seeing from Brosmer. And Brosmer may be the QB3, the developmental guy that sticks. Yeah. And they let Rippon go or retire or whatever it is. They love Rippon because he knows the system. He's a good mind. People talk about him getting on the coaching track. And we'll see. Yes, G-Mac, I think Pickett sucks too. But there's going to be somebody out there. The Browns have, 5 quarterbacks on their roster, and they're not keeping all 5. One will be injured reserve all season, but it is what it is. We'll find somebody if it is needed, but I'm thinking they're betting it's not needed, and that even if Sam Howell had to come in for, God forbid, injured J.J. McCarthy, I think Kevin O'Connell feels he has the capability of making him a decent quarterback. He's proven it so far in the first 3 years of improving quarterbacks that were nobodies. I shouldn't say nobodies. Obviously, Kirk Cousins was somebody, and Sam Darnold was somebody, but they weren't. Neither one of those two were considered fantastic. And then, you take the Pastronaut and everybody else, Mullins, etc. I think you take Howell and make him a decent, substitute if necessary. But let's hope and pray it's not necessary. And then he can develop, as Andrew said, Brosmer as a longer-term developmental piece that could be hopefully traded away for more trade assets or whatever later for, draft assets or, keep them on the team. We'll see.
And Andrew's talking about if we need a good backup QB, does that mean we're saying we don't trust our starter? I don't feel that's what I'm trusting, but I think that, but it's just injuries happen. Kirk blew out his Achilles on a nothing, just stepping on his right foot on a drop back in Green Bay, and so those things happen, and because of that, you need to have good depth at all positions, including quarterback. So I'd feel better if you had a backup quarterback who had a long track record of being in that position, performing capably. Some people mentioned Andy Dalton, Joe Flacco. Those are kind of the usual suspects there, but the Vikings decided not to go after those dudes. And so now we've got the quarterback room that we've got. Sam Howell doesn't, he just doesn't have enough. Even having started 18 games in the NFL, still, I think there's uncertainty for me and other Vikings fans as to when he gets into a game, if he has to get into a game, how is he going to perform? Can he perform at a level where the Vikings don't completely crap the bed and even with the strong roster can't win games because of him? If Andy Dalton's here, I feel reasonable. I know what Andy Dalton's going to do. I don't know what Sam Howell's going to do if he gets in the game with the Vikings. That's just kind of it.
It's sort of a comfort factor.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so remains to be seen, but like you said, maybe the ace in the hole that the Vikings have here is Kevin O'Connell, who has shown, hey, regardless of what the talent he has to work with, he can get the best and even better out of that talent.
Mm-hmm. And he's got a ton of talent this year. So across the board, not just JJ and the quarterbacks, but the whole team.
Mm-hmm.
Enough to make that guy on the left smile.
Indeed.
All right. That's our show for today. Have you got any last words there, Darren?
I do not. I think there's still one OTA left this week, Dave.
For rookies, basically.
Okay, yeah, because I was wondering, who would they even cancel it? Who's going to show for that?
Possibly.
Because they've had great attendance at the OTAs that weren't mandatory so far. Anyway, and that'll be it for the Vikings until training camp starts. So we're into
July
a bit of
20th is when JJ says he's reporting.
Yeah. So I think, like I say at this time, like I say at this time every year, Dave, no news is good news. Because likely the only news you're going to get is somebody got a speeding ticket or a DUI or something like that.
Yes, or I guess, yes, or God forbid what happened last year.
Yeah, and I don't know when's Addison's. We don't really know when Addison's legal
date is. Issue. I don't know. It keeps getting postponed, but I don't know what the resolution is.
Yeah,
and I was so happy because the golf started back up and it looks like it's going to get postponed again. It's pouring in Pittsburgh, but we'll see. Or maybe they're just showing films, but they're still playing. All right. With that, it's Father's Day. U.S. Open's always a great tournament to watch. The course was absolutely brutal before the weather. Now, it looks like it's slowed down a bit, which will help the later players. There's only one under par, and that's Burns. We will see. But the week in the Vikings news goes on, and we have shows as normal. Monday, we have the Real Forno show, and Tyler will be talking about something Minnesota Vikings related. I don't know what yet. Tuesday, we have a special at 6:05 p.m. We have Skolling with Friends, and I'm going to have Rap, the vocal Vike, on, and we're going to be talking some Vikings football and trying to raise some money for his dad's cancer fight. And then back to Wednesday. Not Wednesday. Tyler's moving his second show to Thursday. So Thursday, the Real Forno show, and then back again on Sunday with the two old bloggers. I want to thank everybody for watching today, joining us on your Happy Father's Day, and we appreciate you.
Sure
What
do.
do you say, Darren?
We say SKOL Vikings, baby.
SKOL Vikings.
Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcast as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!